The fluorescent lights of St. Mercy Hospital buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the intensive care unit. Dr. Jonathan Hayes stood at the foot of bed 12, his hands gripping the cold metal rail. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence, a constant reminder of the fragile life before him. The patient, a man in his late 50s, lay motionless, his face pale and drawn. Tubes and wires snaked around his body, connecting him to the machines that kept him alive. His name was Michael Carter, and he was fighting for his life. Before we dive, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And while you're here, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. Now let's get into it. Jonathan's eyes traced the lines on Michael's face, the faint scars of a life lived hard and fast. He had been admitted 3 days ago after collapsing at home. The diagnosis was severe sepsis, a life-threatening condition that had ravaged his body. The medical team had worked tirelessly to stabilize him, but his condition remained critical. Jonathan had been his primary physician since his admission, overseeing every aspect of his care. But tonight, as he stood there, a gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach refused to let him go. It wasn't just the gravity of Michael's condition that weighed on him. It was something deeper, something he had buried years ago. A memory, long suppressed, had resurfaced the moment he saw Michael's name on the admission chart. It was a name he hadn't heard in over a decade, but one he could never forget. Jonathan's mind drifted back to his early years as a resident. He had been young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself. Medicine was his calling, and he had thrown himself into it with everything he had. But in his haste to excel, he had made a mistake that had cost a patient dearly. That patient was Michael Carter. It had been a routine surgery, or so Jonathan had thought. Michael had come in with appendicitis, and Jonathan, under the supervision of his attending physician, had performed the appendectomy. The surgery had gone smoothly, or so it seemed, but in the days that followed, Michael developed complications, severe infections that no one could explain. Jonathan had dismissed it as bad luck, a rare but possible outcome. But deep down, he had known the truth. He had missed something during the surgery, something critical. He had been careless, and Michael had paid the price. The complications had left Michael with permanent damage to his intestines, requiring multiple surgeries and years of ongoing treatment. Jonathan had never admitted his mistake. He had buried it, telling himself that it was better for everyone if he moved on. But now, standing here, he couldn't escape the truth. Michael's current condition, his sepsis, was a direct result of the damage Jonathan had caused all those years ago. Jonathan's hands tightened on the bed rail as a wave of guilt washed over him. He had spent years building his career, becoming one of the most respected doctors in the hospital. He had a reputation to uphold, a life he had worked hard to create, but at what cost? He had lied, not just to Michael, but to himself, and now that lie was staring him in the face. The sound of footsteps pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Dr. Emily Collins, the hospital's chief of surgery, approaching. Emily was a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s, with sharp features and an even sharper mind. She had been Jonathan's mentor during his residency, and he had always admired her dedication to the profession. "Jonathan," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I just reviewed Michael Carter's chart. His condition is deteriorating. We need to discuss our next steps." Jonathan nodded, forcing himself to focus. "I've been monitoring him closely. His blood pressure is unstable, and his kidney function is declining. I've adjusted his antibiotics, but so far, there's no improvement." Emily frowned, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You've been working nonstop since he was admitted. Are you sure you're okay? You look distracted." Jonathan hesitated, his mind racing. He wanted to tell her the truth, to unburden himself of the guilt that had been eating away at him. But the words caught in his throat. How could he admit to her, to anyone, that he had made such a grave mistake, that he had lied for years? "I'm fine," he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I want to do everything I can for him." Emily studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right, but remember, Jonathan, we're a team. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." She turned and walked away, leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts. He glanced back at Michael, his heart heavy. He knew what he had to do. He had to tell the truth. But the thought of it terrified him. What would happen to his career, his reputation? His life as he knew it would be over. And what about Michael? Would he even want to hear the truth after all these years? Jonathan's mind raced as he tried to weigh the consequences. He thought about his wife, Sarah, and their 2 young children. They depended on him, on his career. How could he risk everything he had worked for? But then he thought about Michael, about the pain and suffering he had endured because of Jonathan's mistake. Didn't he deserve to know the truth? The hours passed in a blur as Jonathan wrestled with his conscience. He checked on Michael repeatedly, adjusting his medications, monitoring his vitals, doing everything he could to keep him stable. But no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was fighting a losing battle. Michael's condition was worsening, and Jonathan knew that time was running out. As the night wore on, Jonathan found himself sitting in the hospital chapel. It was a small, quiet space with soft lighting and a sense of peace that he desperately needed. He sat in one of the pews, his head in his hands, praying for guidance. He had never been a particularly religious man, but in that moment he felt a deep need for something greater than himself. "God, I don't know what to do," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I've made a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. Please give me the strength to do what's right." He sat there for what felt like hours, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the chapel windows, he made his decision. He would tell the truth. No matter the consequences, he owed it to Michael, to himself, to finally come clean. Jonathan stood, his legs stiff from sitting for so long, and made his way back to the ICU. Michael's condition had not improved, but he was still holding on. Jonathan took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He pulled up a chair beside Michael's bed and sat down, his heart pounding in his chest. "Michael," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I don't know if you can hear me, but there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Years ago, when you came in for your appendectomy, I was your surgeon. I was young, inexperienced, and I made a mistake. I missed something during the surgery, and it caused you to develop those complications. I should have told you then, but I was scared. I didn't want to admit that I had failed you, but I did, Michael. I failed you, and I'm so sorry." Jonathan's voice broke, and he took a moment to compose himself. "I've carried this guilt with me for years, and I can't keep it inside anymore. You deserve to know the truth, and I'll understand if you can't forgive me. But I needed to tell you, I needed to do the right thing for once in my life." He sat there for a long time, his hand resting on Michael's arm, waiting for some sign, some indication that he had heard him. But Michael remained still, his breathing shallow and labored. Jonathan felt a tear slip down his cheek, and he wiped it away quickly. He had done what he could. The rest was out of his hands. As the morning shift began, Jonathan found himself back in the IU overseeing Michael's care. He had made his confession, but the weight of his guilt was still there, heavy and unrelenting. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be consequences for his actions. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. He had done the right thing, and that was all that mattered. The day passed in a blur of activity, with Jonathan barely taking a moment to rest. He was determined to do everything he could for Michael, to make up for his past mistakes. But as the hours turned into days, it became clear that Michael's condition was not improving. Despite their best efforts, his body was failing him. On the third day, Jonathan was called to Michael's room. His heart sank as he saw the look on the nurse's face. He rushed to Michael's bedside, his hands trembling as he checked his vitals. But it was too late. Michael was gone. Jonathan stood there, his mind numb with shock and grief. He had known this was a possibility, but it didn't make it any easier. He had lost a patient, a man whose life had been irrevocably changed because of his mistake, and now he would never have the chance to make it right. As he stood there, lost in his thoughts, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Emily standing beside him, her expression somber. "Jonathan," she said softly, "I'm so sorry." He nodded, unable to speak. Emily hesitated, then continued, "I heard what you said to him. I was in the room earlier, and I heard your confession." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He had forgotten that others might have been listening. He braced himself for the fallout, for the accusations and the blame, but to his surprise, Emily's expression was one of understanding. "Jonathan, what you did, it took a lot of courage. I know it wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do, and I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. He had expected judgment, condemnation, but instead, he had found compassion. It was more than he deserved, but it was exactly what he needed. In the days that followed, Jonathan found himself grappling with the aftermath of his confession. He knew that there would be consequences, both professionally and personally, but he also knew that he had done the right thing. He had faced his guilt, his fear, and he had come out on the other side. As he stood at Michael's graveside, surrounded by friends and family, He felt a sense of closure. He had made mistakes, but he had also learned from them. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but Jonathan was ready to face it. He had found his conscience, and he would never lose it again. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. And he knew that no matter what happened, he had done the right thing. Thank you for watching. This story was a powerful reminder of the weight of our choices and the importance of facing our mistakes, no matter how difficult it may be. If this video moved you, or if you found yourself reflecting on the complexities of life, morality, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more gripping and emotional stories like this one. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring more thought-provoking content to you. Hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Until next time, take care, and remember, every choice we make shapes the story of our lives. See you in the next video.